What's up, basketball fans? Welcome to the Ratch Report. It is time to talk about the Toronto Raptors because they have made a couple of roster moves, including waiving a couple of players, and we will be discussing their future moves as well. And we did get some update about Chris Boucher's future with the Toronto Raptors, which I will be breaking down in this video as well. So if you are ready to watch, make sure to hit the subscribe button. And with that being said, let's get into today's video. Now, shout out to Raptors Update on Instagram. Definitely give them a follow because they are always very quick with their updates, and they're reporting that the Toronto Raptors have waived Orlando Robinson and Cole Swider. Now, this may come as a surprise to a lot of people, especially myself, because there was some chatter online from a few Raptors reporters on Twitter about Cole Swider potentially being waived. And it was a little bit of a surprising Orlando Robinson being waived, just given that he has played fairly decently. So what is the logic behind waiving these two players, you may ask, especially with the season only a handful of games left? It wouldn't really make a lot of sense for the Toronto Raptors to sign new players at this point, but it was thrown out there the idea that perhaps what the Raptors will do with Cole Swider or the Orlando Robinson might be to bring him back on new contracts, which could go into next season, but also just maybe include a camp invite as well. So that may be the reason why the Toronto Raptors waived these two players. A little bit surprised with Orlando Robinson, who we will talk about here in just a moment. But also, when you do take a look at the Raptors roster here, you have to understand that the Raptors are in a position where their roster is essentially pretty much full here. And do keep in mind, even though Chris Boucher and Garrett Temple are free agents, and Chris Boucher we'll talk about later in a few minutes here, but those two guys are free agents, which creates a couple of additional roster spots. The Toronto Raptors do own their own first round pick this year, of course, and they also own Portland's second round pick as well, which means we will be getting two new rookies during the offseason, but there's always the chance that the Toronto Raptors could potentially add a undrafted player as well. So again, taking a look at Orlando Robinson, really surprised by this. Again, he's 24 years old, 7 foot tall. He's got an insane wingspan of 7 foot 4 inches. And I know what people are thinking. He's not going to be a starting center, even as a backup center. Some fans absolutely have the right to question if he's a long-term solution at the backup center. But one thing I do want to say with Orlando Robinson, again, I'm not suggesting that he's going to be the Raptors backup center for several years moving forward, or that, he's going to be the future of the Toronto Raptors. But do keep in mind that young centers do take a lot more time to develop. And with respect to Orlando, I think he has had a pretty decent season. In 20 minutes this season with the Toronto Raptors, he's shot not great from the field. I'm going to be honest. You want a little bit more productivity from Orlando. You want him to finish around the rim and particularly a lot better. Only 44% for a 7 foot center. It is unacceptable. But when you look at that 3-point percentage, for him, if he's able to continue to expand that part of his game where he's shooting a lot more threes, but also hitting a lot more threes, he's shooting 34% on 1.3 attempts from the 3-point line. We've also seen it just time and time again in some games where he'll hit threes. And it's really not shocking because that is something that I think he should definitely work on and expand as well moving forward. Just considering where the NBA is going, his free throw percentage is pretty respectable, 79%. 5.9 rebounds, 1.9 assists is really good for a center, guys. I do want to emphasize on that. That is one of the reasons the Raptors brought him into their rosters. Obviously, a desperate need for a center, but also because he can pass as well. Now, again, being 7 foot tall and having a wingspan of 7 foot 4 is great, but I also want him to block a little bit more shots. I know he alters shots quite a bit at the rim, and it doesn't necessarily show up in the box score as well, but I do want him to expand that part of his game a little bit more, just be a little bit more aggressive, averaging 8.1 points again in 20 minutes, so definitely not bad. The thing I think the Raptors should certainly do with Orlando, obviously, it entirely depends on who they draft in this year's draft class. Obviously, Kaman Malawach is a player to watch. If we draft him, then Orlando Robinson all of a sudden doesn't make a lot of sense on this roster. But even when we have talked about Orlando Robinson potentially getting a camp invite, I think it is important for a Toronto Raptors team to kind of just let him work with Darko in the offseason, kind of let him expand his game a little bit more, work on some parts of his game which he can alter, and it'll look a lot better coming into next season. Again, he is always going to be a backup center. I don't realistically think he's going to be a starting center at any point in his NBA career. But even if you have a backup center, doing that for you, it is still good quality minutes he can play for you. So I really like Orlando. I definitely hope he definitely comes back. We won't find out until Saturday, though. I do believe we won't find out until Saturday if these players are being brought back or if the Raptors decide to sign someone else. So let's talk about Cole Swider quickly before we move on to Chris Boucher. So Cole Swider was a player, again, like you see, his stats are 6'9", 220 pounds. He's going to be 26 in another, less than a month. With the Toronto Raptors this season in 19 minutes, only 8 games. So I will say only 8 games. Again, percentages wise, his stats don't look great. 37.9% on 7.3 field goal attempts per game. Shooting is the big thing with him. 5.3 attempts per game from the 3-point line, only 35.7% for someone who's known as a sniper. Obviously, when you're playing such few games, every game does affect your percentages drastically. Again, he had that one game where he shot 0 of 8 from the field. So obviously those kind of things, those kind of games really hurt your percentages and stats overall. But overall, 3.1 rebounds, half a steal a game, 7.4 points. Again, he's never going to be a 6-7 man off the bench for a team like the Toronto Raptors. So do keep in mind. But one thing I've noticed is besides his 3-point shooting, he does rebound fairly decently as well. And again, 6'9", just being a taller shooter is so much more. I did have someone ask me in the comment section, well, you got Jamison Battle. Why do you need Cole Swider? For one simple reason, Jamison Battle is great in his own way, but Cole Swider is a different type of 3-point shooter. I think when we talk about players like this that are 3-point specialists, there is something to note that there are different types of 3-point shooters as well. So with Cole, I think he's just having advantage of, a handful of inches taller than Jamison Battle as well. He can, it certainly makes a big difference, when you're taller and you're able to shoot 3-point shots. So again, if Cole doesn't come back, I mean, that's completely fine. Again, just given how limited our roster is. Also, I did forget to mention, but AJ Lawson is on a 2-way contract as well. So maybe they look to convert him and have him onto our roster for next season. So again, if Cole does leave, best of luck to him. I think he also fits more of a roster when we talk about teams that are more focused on offense rather than defense. You think of a team like the Pacers. I think he would absolutely be amazing there. Even for a team like the Orlando Magic that need 3-point shooting to, space the floors for some of their star guys there. I think he could possibly fit there as well. Pistons need 3-point shooting, even though they're doing a lot better this season. And I think a team like the Warriors could use him as well. He could be one of those guys that's going to be a 10th, 11 man off the bench. Again, I would not be surprised. So I will say this. I will not be surprised if the Toronto Raptors bring him back and invite him to camp just to kind of make it super competitive we know how they kind of do things of have 3 guys fighting for one roster spot at the end of camp. So we'll see what happens. But let's talk about Chris Boucher because we got a very interesting update to talk about. Now, again, shout out to Raptors Update once again because they're reporting there is a mutual interest in having Chris Boucher return to Toronto in a new deal, according to Michael Grange. Now, obviously, this would be interesting, but if I'm Chris Boucher, with respect to the Raptors organization, you have to decide at some point if Darko's not going to play him, if the front office, whatever decisions are going on behind the scenes, are not going to play him, and kind of pretty much what we've seen towards the end of the season. This is quite disrespectful to Chris Boucher. Chris Boucher should feel no guilt in leaving the Toronto Raptors. I know this feels weird saying this as a Raptors fan, but if Chris Boucher, he's never complained, he's been super professional, super respectful, and he's always helped the younger guys. You can kind of see him talking there and just laughing and just having a good time and just kind of keeping things calm on the bench as well. If I'm Chris Boucher and I'm signing with the Toronto Raptors, I know this sounds ludicrous. I'm putting an incentive in there. So players get incentives for playing more games. If I'm Chris Boucher, I'm putting in the fact that if I play less than 55, 60 games next season, I'm getting an extra 200, 300,000 bonus on my contract. I know, look, I'm not saying Chris Boucher has that kind of leverage with the Toronto Raptors, but it is quite disrespectful of the Toronto Raptors to kind of do what they've been doing with Chris Boucher, right? Like if you're not going to play him, why not just trade him, right? And also just do consider that the Raptors are very close to that luxury tax again. So with that 7th pick, who's probably going to be making, if the Raptors do stay there, they're probably going to be making around $7, $8, $9 million. We're pretty much in the luxury tax, and then that's not to mention you're probably going to have to pay Chris Boucher another 5, 6, 7 million, and I'm pretty sure more teams out there will pay him a lot more. So even if Chris Boucher does return to the Toronto Raptors, I don't think it will be for more than 5, 6, $7 million. The Raptors can't afford to go that far into the luxury. So again, we'll see what happens, but I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on these moves. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. And again, apologies, guys. I'm feeling a little bit under the weather. Just got a massive headache as well. So there's no trivia question. If you do want a shout out, let me know in the comment section below. So that will be it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. And I hope you guys have yourselves a great day.